Hi, how are you?
Hi, good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I've just got to pull up my course real quick. Usually I have it open before, but I got a little sidetracked with my kids a little bit ago. So sorry, I'm almost ready, but this will give people another minute to show up because I've still got people trickling in. Um, so my name is Courtney, and I passed the course subjects years ago, and I've been offering tutoring ever since. Um, Had a lot of success helping people even that have learning difficulties, ADHD, dyscalculia, dyslexia, pass their tests, even people that have tried other programs that haven't been successful. So I think, you'll find what you learned tonight to be very helpful. The core subjects test is a monster. It's got a higher passing rate than a lot of other tests. So that sounds good. But the thing is that it's five tests, basically. That's what I say, because you have to pass each one. So if you fail even one section, you're retaking that, right? So it's really like you're passing five tests instead of one. So I've got my course open. Let me share some data with y'all before we get started. I always like to start with some information. So let me pull this up. If you just Google EPP passing rates, that stands for Educator Preparation Program. This document will come up. This is from the state, Texas Educator Certification Examination Program Pass Rate Report. And then you can see right here the years that they give you the data, and it says first attempt. So this only accounts for people taking their test the first time. So now let's look at core subjects EC through 6. This is the passing rate. Sorry, my mouse is a little bit crazy today. So I thought we would do math tonight because I consistently hear from people that they hate math, right? That's what's holding them back is math and social studies. Those are the two, right? And interestingly, that's what the data shows me too, right? So even though I already knew that, because that's what I hear, let's look at ELAR. We always want to look at the 901 because that's the new version. 801 was the test from years ago. So you can see 87% of the people pass the ELAR on the first try. That's pretty good. Fine arts, 80%, still pretty good. Math dips down to 77%. Science is 83%, and social studies is a little bit lower at 74%, right? So even though these passing rates sound pretty good, like you can see there's some with much lower, right? Like 23%. But if we think about the fact that 20 something percent, 23% aren't passing math on their first try, and another 17% aren't passing science on the first try, and we add all these up, it's still a lot of people. It's a lot of people that didn't pass all five on their first try, if that makes sense, right? So I'd like to know what the data is on people that pass all five on their first try. It's going to be a lot lower, right? But I don't know how low because they don't have that data. So that's a little bit of information for you. And maybe that makes you feel better if you've taken it and you didn't pass yet, right? And like I said, I've helped lots of people that have not passed on their first try. Now, if we Google Texas NESINC manual, click on prepare, and then scroll down and click on core subjects EC through 6. This is the website where you go to register for your test, but they also have preparation manuals. If you only use this free stuff, it's not really enough for most people to pass, right? They call it a preparation material, but I'll tell you why this isn't enough. Let me show you. So we go to the overview and exam framework. Let's look at this one. Competency 4. Understands factors affecting reading comprehension, word analysis, skills, prior knowledge, language, background experience, previous reading experiences, fluency, vocabulary development, ability to monitor understanding, characteristics of specific texts, etc. But it doesn't tell you what any of these things are or what you need to know about them. Those are pretty clear cut, but you might not know that monitoring understanding, the word they want to know for that is metacognitive strategies, right? Because they're not telling you that. They're not telling you everything you need to know. So if you only use this, it's going to be hard to pass, right? Now, they did come up with something recently, and I think this is probably really good, but I haven't bought it, called Texas Right Start. And I would trust this because it's from the people that write the test. But you can see if you have to buy all of them separately. Let me see. I think they've got a bundle. They've got a bundle, so that's pretty good. You can do that. And like I said, I haven't bought it, but I think this would be trustworthy. Um, But tonight I'm going to show you my material, which I know works because I've used it and many other people have used it to pass. And I don't know what theirs is like, but I can tell you mine has content to read for every competency, videos for every single competency. A lot of the programs out there just have a video here and a video there, but mine has a video for every single part of the test and then a practice test for everything, right? So I don't know what all theirs includes, but that's what mine includes. So just be careful if you buy another program because some of them are really good and I've bought some of them. Like before I take a new test that I don't have a study guide for, like I'll give you an example. I took the special ed test about 2 years ago and I didn't have a study guide for it yet. So I bought one by a big name company and I noticed that it wasn't that close to the competencies, right? So I was like, well, that's not going to help me. So I didn't use it. And then I bought another program and it was closer to the competencies, but it was very cursory. It just barely had enough information. So I didn't use that either. So then I just did my own research, looking at the preparation manual and Googling every last thing that was in the preparation manual and made my own study guide, and I passed like that. But I have bought 240 tutoring, and I have to say theirs is thorough and it is aligned to the competencies. It's really a good program. So some of the programs are good and they're worth it. But the only thing I've heard from many people about 240, and I would agree with this having bought it, is that it's information overload, right? It's all good stuff, but sorry, my GPS decided to go off, and I haven't been driving in a long time. Sorry about that. So 240, really good, but you're going to spend a lot of time and you're going to learn a lot of good stuff. But mine is kind of a shortcut, right? So I think it works for many people, especially if you have a hard time staying focused and you need lots of videos, then mine has videos for every single thing. So I thought tonight we'd do math because I consistently hear from people, I hate math. Math is holding me back, right? And so let's look at my course for math. And I thought tonight we'll keep it light and we'll do competency one for this reason. There's no math in competency one. So we can actually get our math score up without learning math if we really nail competency one, right? And if you need help on one of the competencies that does have math, if you go to my YouTube channel, I do have some videos where I went over some of the other competencies, right? Or if you get my course, you're going to have everything. But I thought we would do competency one. We can kind of build our confidence and see that a fifth of the math is really not even math. It's all about teaching math. So hopefully that'll make you feel better about this. So you can see in my course, it starts out with a video where I'm explaining everything, right? So this is the first part of competency one. And it says plan instructional activities that are appropriate for all students by applying knowledge of research-based theories and principles of learning mathematics. So this is what I mean. This is what the state manual tells you, but it doesn't tell you which research-based theories you need to know or which principles of learning mathematics. So it's very vague and very broad, right? So what I've done is to kind of figure out which ones do we need to know, because it's hard to know which ones. I look at the preparation manual free questions and I see which ones they mention in there. And then I know those are the ones they're focusing on, right? So that's how I know which ones to do, which ones are in that free manual. And that gives us a big clue. So one of the best ways to improve your teaching is to have good classroom management. So if you know all the math in the world, but you don't have classroom management, your kids aren't going to learn much math because it's too chaotic, right? But if you know, let's say you're good at math, but not great, but you have excellent classroom management, your kids are actually going to learn more math and you're going to have a better time teaching. So it's in your best interest to learn classroom management, like read a book on it or watch some videos. Another research-based way to improve math performance is to do collaborative learning activities where students work together, right? Make sure there's some rules and procedures and they work together. This is based on Lev Vygotsky's ideas. The interaction is theory, right? So that's collaborative learning, working together. Motivation. So we know motivation is important, and students who are intrinsically motivated are going to almost always perform better because they have some goals in mind and they put effort into their learning, right? But we do have some students that just aren't motivated, and we know that. Well, we still want to help them too, right? So sometimes it's appropriate to use external rewards, tangible rewards, to try to ignite that motivation for them. And then hopefully that will transfer to more internal motivation once they build some confidence. Because a lot of kids lack motivation, they really lack confidence. They think they can't do it, so why even try? So if we can show them they can do it for a reward, eventually they might not even need that reward. And then we want to use effective teaching strategies, learner-centered instruction. Everything should be focused on the students. Differentiated instruction, we have to keep in mind that everybody's different and meet their individual needs. So they're all going to come from different cultures, different socioeconomic statuses, different motivation levels, different home languages and interests and learning styles. And we take all of that into account when we teach. We already talked about collaborative learning. When we're teaching math or reading, we want to do small group targeted instruction, right? So that means we break them down by ability level. And that might sound controversial. We think, oh, we should be mixing them up. That's true for collaborative learning. We mix them up, different ability levels and everything like that. But when we're doing small group targeted instruction, how can we help students that one student is working on multiplication and one can barely add? How can we help them at the same time? But if they're both working on multiplication, we can help them at the same time. And then we can help another group that's just working on addition at the same time, right? And we can rotate through those centers and give them stuff to do while the teacher's helping one group. But when we're doing collaborative learning, then we do the heterogeneous grouping. We also want to mix in non-linguistic representations like charts, pictures, graphs, right? Songs, rhymes, use graphic organizers. We always want to teach students how to use metacognitive strategies. Those are strategies to think about their own thinking, self-evaluation. So maybe as they're reading a math question, they say, I didn't understand that. I'm going to go back and reread that. Or I don't know what that word means. I'm going to look for a context clue or use a dictionary. We want to help students make goals and provide feedback. And when we assign homework, it should be meaningful, and classwork too, not busy work. It should have a purpose and tie into the TEKS. Anytime I repeat something in my course, it's because they repeat it in the manual. So you'll see some repetition here, and that's to be expected. As I said earlier, instruction should be learner-centered, focused on the needs of the students. Everything we do needs to be based on the TEKS, and we also have to implement the ELPS, which are the English Language Proficiency Standards. And so what happens is if you have even one English language learner in your classroom, you have to follow the English Language Proficiency Standards. So if you don't have my course and so you don't have access to these hyperlinks, you can just Google ELPS and it will come up, English Language Proficiency Standards. All right. So I love teaching this because this comes up on every subject of the core subjects and on the PPR. So what you're about to learn is going to help you on all 5 subjects and even on your PPR. And so the sensory motor stage, birth to 2 years, this is when they're learning from movement and from their senses. And that's why babies put everything in their mouths. That's how they're learning. Next, we have the pre-operation stage. Usually they're 2 to 7 years old and their vocabulary is expanding. They're still egocentric, so they only understand things from their point of view. They're slowly starting to decenter, to realize they're not the center of the universe. And they believe in animism, symbolism, and moral realism. So animism means they think everything has the traits of living beings. So they think even toys are kind of alive, right? Symbolism, that something's a symbol of something else, they start to understand that. And moral realism means they think everybody has the same moral code as them. And I think that's one of the reasons that tattling is so common at that age, because they think everybody thinks like them. So maybe something's that whatever it is that somebody did might not even really be wrong. It's just different, but to them it's wrong, right? So they tattle about every little thing. And then we have the concrete operation stage, usually 7 to 11 years old. They're starting to think in more rational terms. They still need a concrete item to be able to think about something. So that's why it's called concrete operations, right? Their belief in animism is declining. The other thing to know about this is they're starting to understand conservation. So I always remember the con and concrete and the con and conservation. Help me remember that those go together, because sometimes they ask questions about in what stage do they learn conservation? well, that's concrete operations. So conservation means that things might not appear to be the same, but they could be the same. For example, a tall, skinny glass of 8 ounces of water is the same amount of water as a short, wide glass, right? But before they understand conservation, if you ask them which one has more water, they're almost always going to pick the tall glass. And then the last stage is formal operations. Usually they enter at 11 to 12 years, but maybe not even until they're 16 years old. And this is when they're able to think abstractly. They no longer need a physical object in front of them, and they can engage in hypothetical deductive reasoning. So they can come up with a scenario and possible outcomes and evaluate them and think of a hypothesis. So you want to use technology in the classroom. Whatever school you work at, they're going to have websites and programs for you to use, right? I have always liked Starfall. I've used it with my own kids. Fraction strips and fraction wheels are very effective. You can use your classroom money to buy some of those. Instructional grouping, we talked about this already, but it comes up again, to use that homogeneous grouping in small groups to do targeted instruction. Using tools in mathematics. So we need to know about the different tools and the different forms of measure. So standard units of measure, when we're talking about measuring things in a standard way, feet, inches, meters, centimeters, etc. They'll use rulers and measuring tapes. But when they're in kindergarten and first grade, they very often use non-standard units of measure, where they use paper clips, pencils, or blocks to measure how long something is, right? They line up pencils lengthwise and measure it like that. When they're learning about angles, you would use protractors for that, right? And then when they're learning estimation, you would have like maybe a big jar full of M&Ms, and they have to guess how many M&Ms fit in there, estimate. And when you're teaching about money, they can have plain money. So we've already talked about this, but like I said, if they repeat it in the manual, I repeat it. The only thing we didn't talk about is tutoring. That's when students are not responding to your whole group instruction. They might need some one-on-one help, right? And there's different tiers of learning of instruction. We also have not talked about Bloom's taxonomy yet, where you ask the lower level questions and you also ask the higher level questions. So lower level would be remember and understand, like knowledge, and did you understand the main idea? And then mid-level is apply and analyze, and the highest level are evaluate and create, where they come up with their own new ending or their own new idea to whatever that scenario is. We don't want to rely on worksheets a lot. We want to have lots of hands-on, more meaningful activities. Everything we do should be based on the TEKS. The good thing is that if you teach at a school district, your curriculum is required to be aligned to the TEKS. So you're not going to have to be aligning the TEKS, but you might have to write them on the board, something like that. You want to have activities that appeal to visual, kinesthetic, and auditory learners. I'm sure you've already learned about that in your program, but visual learners learn from seeing, like pictures, graphs, charts. Kinesthetic by doing with their hands or their body, and auditory by hearing, like a song, rhyme, or chant. We want to use a variety of assessments. So informal assessments are like a show what you know, an exit ticket, just asking questions, not for a grade. Formal assessments is like a quiz or a test, usually used for a grade. Formative assessments are given while you're still teaching a unit. So you're still forming your instruction because you're using that data to plan further instruction, and they're still forming their knowledge. So I think of it like that. I'm still forming, they're still forming. It's a formative assessment. And then a summative assessment is given at the end of a unit when everything is summed up. So like the STAR test is given at the end of the year, and it's a summative test. Okay, next, we want to do interdisciplinary units. This is when we connect different subjects. So you might connect math, science, social studies, and language arts in a creative way. So one way I saw this done in a first grade class was a teacher did a unit on Johnny Appleseed. And in social studies, they read about Johnny Appleseed. In language arts, they wrote a reflection about it. In math, they made applesauce together using a recipe. And in science, they learned about the life cycle of an apple tree. So it was interdisciplinary. Thematic just means there's a theme. So that was also thematic. The theme was apples. We already talked about metacognition, that's thinking about thinking or self-evaluation. So we want to teach students to evaluate their own comprehension by modeling that same behavior, right? So if we're doing a word problem, we say, do I understand what the question is asking? Or I didn't understand this part, I'm going to reread it. We already talked about the different types of assessments, so I'm going to skip that because we just did that, but like I said, they repeat it. Everything you do, like I said, if you have an English language learner, you have to tie in the ELPS, right? If you have a special ed or 504 student, make sure you read their IEP, their 504 plan, and implement it. You're required by law to do that. We already talked about informal and formal assessments, but we didn't talk about these yet. Norm reference test shows how a student performs relative to his or her peers. So they're in the 90th percentile or the 40th percentile. That means they did better than 90% of their peers or better than 40% of their peers. Criterion reference means it tests their knowledge of certain skills. So the STAR test is criterion reference. It's based off the knowledge and skills for that grade level or that course. It's not norm reference to compare you to your peers. It's saying, did you learn the content for that grade level? And then we always want to teach students about how math is used in different careers. So invite in guest speakers that talk about how they use math in their real world, right? So I'm able to give my kids lots of examples about how I use math in my job. And of course, I'm teaching math, right? But I also use math to keep track of my income, to pay my taxes, right? To make plans. Can I afford to buy this that I need for my business, or should I wait? To calculate how much I pay my social media manager, things like that. So I'm always using math for real world purposes, right? Now let's look at a couple of sample questions and then I'll see if you guys have any questions. I'm going to skip this one because it's so long, it would be hard to read that. So I'm just going to get it wrong and we'll go to the next one. This one's a little bit shorter so we can read it easier. Let me move this up and move this down and that way y'all can see all of the, can you see all of the answer choices on that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'll give you guys a second to answer that. Feel free to put your answer in the chat box or you can just say it out loud. We've got a small group.
I would say D since they're kindergarten.
Yeah. So this one, I'll pick D and I'll show you. Preliminary skills. So this one's actually C because I mean D is not technically wrong, but they do this all the time, so I do it too, where you have to pick the best answer, right? Using paper clips is a way to use non-standard units of measure. A is incorrect because standard units of measure would be centimeters, inches, or whatever, and they're not estimating, so B is incorrect. D is incorrect because these skills are not necessarily required before using. They're recommended, but not necessarily required. But that would be the next best answer choice, right? Now let's do this one and I'll just scroll down because this one's not super long, but I'll scroll down when y'all are ready to see the next two answer choices. What do you guys think about this one? What type of assessment is that? So she's using it to see what they already understand, right? So it sounds like she's planning further instruction from that, and they're still learning. Okay, we do have an answer. Good. Oh, I'm sorry, Diana. I didn't see your question. I guess she already left. She was asking if we were doing social studies. So this would be a formative assessment. So that concludes the tutoring. Does anybody have any questions? And then if you want to try my courses, I know you might already have something, but if it's not working for you or you like what you saw today, I'll put the link in the chat box so you can enroll in my courses. And if you just need one subject, you can enroll in just the subject you need, or you can do the bundle for all of them. But I think you'd like my courses because they're very concise and only have what you need to know, nothing extra, like some of the programs out there that have a lot of information. Um, so that's about it. Any questions or comments? No. All right. Well, thanks so much. Y'all have a great night.